welcome to another episode of my Habits of series, where I attempt to tease out the habits and approaches of the most amazing guitar players in the universe. I've covered players from Jimi Hendrix to John Mayer to John Frusciante to Steve Vai and Joe Satriani and Mark Tremonti of late. Well, we have another edition, and it is none other than, wait for it, drum roll, the highly anticipated Dimebag Darrell. Dimebag is one of the most legendary players of the guitar world, and we have a lot to go over regarding his habits, and I'm going to let you know, if you're new to this series, that I don't often try and chase the tone of these guitar players. I am more about teasing out their habits and figuring out their skills in a way that you can use and apply to your guitar playing, because none of us are going to be the next Dimebag Darrell. We're going to be the next whoever we are. So we want to be able to pick and choose these different tactics and approaches to the guitar, but apply these skills to our guitar playing and make them our own, integrate them into our own arsenal. With that in mind, I do have to let you know about a certain tonal element of Dimebag Darrell's guitar sound, which is none other than the scooped mids. There's an EQ band and there's lows, mids, and highs. Guitar typically sits in that mid range. If you've never heard of this before, a little EQ 101. So in order to scoop the mids, you can either do it with an amp, but it's a little bit easier to do it if you have a tool like this. This is the JHS Haunting Mids. There's a link in the description if you want to check this pedal out and grab one yourself. This is going to allow us to scoop out the mid-range of the guitar sound to achieve that highly distinguishable and super cool sounding Dimebag Darrell scooped mid sound. So just to give you an example, this would be a pretty balanced EQ sound. And this would be using the scooped mid approach. As you can see on the pedal here, the sweep knob is the actual frequency that I am approaching and attacking. So in this case, it's about 250 hertz, and the mids knob means I am taking out. If you push this knob all the way to the right, it will actually push those mids and give you a much more saturated sound, but pulling it all the way to the left is going to essentially eliminate those mids. And the most useful thing about this pedal is the high and low switch here. When it's set to high, it is a little bit more of a broad EQ band, where low is a more intense scoop. I'm going to keep it set to high for most of this lesson, but I will change it to low and really scoop out those mids even more harshly when we get to the riffing styles of Dimebag Darrell. So there's a couple phases to this whammy squeal technique. We're going to use the G string for this particular example. You can use other strings, but the G string will be the first string that'll kind of be the most effective because you can activate the harmonics pretty easily. You may end up actually ringing out the D string and maybe even the A or B strings when you do this stuff, but rest assured your target is the G string for this one. Obviously, it should go without saying, you need a floating bridge for this to work, which means it can go both down and up as far as the whammy action is concerned. So you're gonna first flick the G string like this. And you can do a traditional style like this, pushing the bar, or you can do it Steve Vai style, Dimebag style, and actually pull the bar back here and pull it up. After the dive and that G string is just flapping like that, you are going to activate a harmonic, and that is going to happen maybe around the 5th or 4th fret. The higher you get towards the headstock, the more squealy the harmonic will get, but it's also a little bit more difficult the higher you go towards the headstock. So start with the 5th fret. Any natural harmonic will do, but start with the 5th fret. That's a good beginner spot, and from there you can move up as you see fit. And the key here is to not attack that harmonic. You just want to activate it when that G string is flapping. So it's only one pick attack. It is not this. It's... And obviously that tapping motion to activate the harmonic happens at the bottom of the dive when the strings are all flappy. That face is not required, but it can be helpful. So moving along with some more Dimebag tricks, there's a technique Dime used in a few different guitar solos where he called it a fake echo technique or something. I saw in a couple interviews he said it's like a fake echo. So this technique's a little trickier than it looks just because of how precise you have to be. And I am basically grabbing the 2nd fret of the G string with my index finger on my picking hand, pulling that up towards the high octave A on that same G string. And as I reach that octave, I'm then jumping off from what was holding the actual note and coming down and doing the exact same motion just with the opposite hand. A little complicated to actually explain it. It's maybe easier if I show you. So here's the A note, and this is our target A note. So here's the slide. But as I mentioned, when that slide is happening, jump off with your picking hand and poke that same A note, and you come up with something like this. You really got to poke it with some precision. Obviously, in context, it sounds a little cooler. Now, as we move away from the kind of showmanship and into the nuts and bolts of Dimebag's lead guitar playing, we get to a group of different techniques that I want to go over. The first concept's pretty straightforward. It is just the notion of huge, huge bends. I do mean huge. Now, I am going about a double step, so if this is the, what is this, the 19th fret of the B string, I'm making it up to the 23rd fret. Be careful with this one. If you don't have new strings on here, you may snap one, but this is definitely a key signature of Dimebag's. He would just be so aggressive, and that brings me to the next sort of piece of the puzzle is his vibrato. And again, a pretty straightforward, you have to be kind of strong to execute Dimebag's techniques because he's so aggressive and so metal that it just sort of came out as a strong man's guitar playing technique. And the vibrato is certainly indicative of that. So this would be an example of Dime's vibrato. So as you can feel there, it's just angry. And I go about this by sort of creating one mega finger, which is to say you combine these 3 fingers, if you're using your ring finger as the primary bending tool, and really combine the strength of those fingers to get this almost whole step vibrato. And when you are on the lighter strings from G, B to E, that's usually going to be your index finger where you can use this doorknob opening movement with your hand and wrist to execute that and have the leverage to pull off that whole step vibrato. And that is really all there is to it. One more thing on the bends. When Dime would do the sort of blistering pentatonic runs, he would have this start-stop action where he would be playing really, really fast and then bloom into this bend with that massive vibrato, something like this. Now, it sort of can happen at any point in the phrase, but it would tend to be something that Dime would whip out to add a bit of room in the solo and let the phrasing breathe, which is a great way to describe any awesome guitar player, is having a sort of roller coaster ride of a guitar solo. Moving forward with more habits of Dimebag's guitar playing, we're going to talk a little bit about the music theory that he used, because it was really interesting to analyze this as I was preparing for this lesson. Of course, you have to recognize the fact that Dimebag loved using the major third in these minor tonalities, just adding this really weird, ominous vibe to any sort of material that he wrote. And the major third is usually shunned in the metal community as it is, so it's a really interesting choice that he made over and over again. Now, Dimebag's shreddy stuff was technically major scale oriented with a couple odd notes here and there, but it also contained a lot of blues notes. And what I mean by that is he relied a lot on the positions we're all familiar with regarding pentatonics, but he would really implement that blues note in very interesting ways. Just in case any of y'all aren't familiar with the pentatonic scale, here it is in root position from the A note. And this is the flat 5 note right here and right here. So adding those in, it would sound like this. And that already sounds a little Dimebag, right? So that is the scale that he would particularly enjoy using in solos. And here's the X factor, I think, with Dimebag's sound. His use of non-traditional pentatonic positions is really, I think, what made him stand out among other bluesy shredder guys. So when you think minor pentatonic scale or blues scale, you think exactly what I just showed you, the root position. But Dimebag would actually favor the 3rd and 4th positions. So instead of playing down here, Dime might opt for this iteration in the 3rd position of the blues scale. So I'd recommend not only learning your root position blues scale, but learning it all up and down the neck in as many keys as you can, and it will be so helpful for you in so many different ways. And then you can arpeggiate. And it just becomes an endless pool that you can draw from. So this is where I'll flip to the low setting on the JHS Haunting Mids pedal and really tighten up this signal to get that vacant mid sound that Dime was known for. Other power chords are essentially inverted power chords. So instead of a typical, say, D power chord like this that you're used to, we would invert that either in a major way or a minor way. So we're actually taking away the 5th that makes a power chord and changing it to a 3rd, either major 3rd or minor 3rd, which would be something like this, major, or this, minor. And it also works down here, of course. And this sort of overtone centric sound was definitely part of Dimebag's signature arsenal when it comes to his riff writing. So just off the top of my head, Dime might come up with something like this. So obviously he still used power chords, but it was those other power chords that really gave a different angle to his sound, and to me, made him one of the best metal guitar players of all time. Well, there you have it, guys, the habits of Dimebag Darrell. I certainly hope you learned something from this lesson and took something away from it. I worked really hard on it. Please give me a like, I would appreciate it, or don't, I don't really care. As long as you watch, that's all I really care about, and I really appreciate your support. And thanks to JHS for this Haunting Mids pedal. Make sure to check out the description if you want to Dimebag Darrell up your tone by scooping out the mids, or of course, I didn't even go over the fact that you can boost the mids with this pedal, both ways of affecting your guitar frequency, are good ways, and there are plenty of iterations that you can create with this pedal. So check it out in the description, and thanks again for watching. I will see you next time, but until then, keep shredding.